Bernardo, your host of MyGovWatch Live, the B2G Roundtable. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains here in the US, good afternoon, good morning to those out west, and hello to anyone joining us from the far corners of the earth or watching online in the future. Today is Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023. This series is brought to you by MyGovWatch.com. MyGovWatch is revolutionizing traditional bid notification by providing RFP leads in more than 200 industries with proprietary artificial intelligence at double the rate of free government sites and at a fraction of the cost of legacy paid websites. Big government contracts don't start with a solicitation, but all roads lead to one, and your budget for hearing about RFPs does not have to be thousands of dollars per year. Start your 14-day trial today. Our co-host with the co-most today is a man by the name of Jon Barker. How you doing, Jon?
Doing great. Thanks for asking, Nick. Appreciate the opportunity here.
And we see that you're joining us from the interstellar nether reaches of space. What do you think of my meme?
I like it. I kind of agree. You know, a lot of times, are you there? Are you there? And you know, what the signals I get up here are incredible, right? I get a different perspective, and you know, it is kind of like talking to a long lost relative or something like that, because you know, with what COVID taught us is, you know, the ability to leverage a lot of these modern technology tools that we have, but has that really gotten any better than the old seance of, you know, yesteryear, right?
Absolutely. And folks who are with us and who continue to join us as we get started here, Jon is the founder of Price to Win Solutions, a management consulting company that helps companies win more government contracts. Jon has been in GovCon since 2000 and has personally submitted over 1,200 proposals totaling $5 billion in potential contract value. Jon has held numerous positions to include those in program control, contracts and subcontracts management, consulting, and proposal pricing, and has overseen annual business exceeding $150 million per year. Jon finds business opportunities for small business and helps them understand the GovCon market and acquisition process so they can actually win profitable contracts. So, Jon, I understand you did a little bit of traveling recently. I think you were in New Orleans. What do you love about New Orleans?
Well, this was my 6th time in New Orleans. I went 5 straight years in college. I was playing for a club lacrosse team, and we had a tournament in February in New Orleans, the weekend before Mardi Gras, and it was an absolute blast. And you can imagine, as a first 19-year-old, when the drinking age was 18 in New Orleans, I was had a different perspective than I did as a 46-year-old business owner at a conference. But my wife and I did have the luxury of spending a few extra days there on the front end of the conference, so we got to see a lot of the Mardi Gras floats and parades, and it was just a fun, fantastic time. A little bit of a blur at times, but it just went by so fast. And then she left to go back on a plane to take care of our children, and then it was all business for me at the 8A conference, where there were 2,200 different attendees. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of networking, and a lot of you know, potential business to be had.
And would you say the 8A conference, are there a lot of folks there who, is it mostly people who already have the 8A status, or would you say it's a lot of people who were thinking about it, or what would you say the mix of the crowd is?
I would say a lot of it was government people who were looking for 8As, right? They were from the small business offices of respective agencies, but most of them were 8As or companies that were very seriously getting close to pulling the trigger on 8As. A lot of the gist of it was a lot of companies go after their 8As before they're ready, right? Before they really understand the federal market, because there is a finite time period where a company can be an 8A. So a lot of them do a little bit too early and then spend the first 2 years kind of mucking around on how to be a government contractor. You bet you'd be better off, you know, spending a few years as just a small business or a woman owner, a veteran owner, whatever. You know, kind of building up your Rolodex of things like that, and before getting the 8A.
Sure. So, folks, we have a good amount of attendees here. I will just say that if I spoke with you, or if we traded emails and I said we would cover your content, we will cover your content. I'll just tell you that Paul Marcus, Michael Stipa, Chris Grant, and Tom Colson, any of you who are with us, we're coming to you in that order. So if you heard your name there, Just realize we're going to be reaching out to you during the session in that order. So if we call on you, or if you're joining us, this is the first time we've turned off the handwritten or typewritten question tool. We'd really like this to remain an interactive forum, so we'd like you to at least give us your audio. That's at a minimum. If you'd like to give us video as well, that's great. We'll take that, or if you're not in a place where that's suitable, audio is just fine. And you can just raise your hand. I see there's at least one hand that's been raised. So there will be moments where we just need to, maybe switch gears. So that's when we'll call on you and ask you to join us. I'll promote you to a panelist, and if you're on video, you'll join us in that way. But Jon, just leading up to today's event, I was just curious. Everyone has a different story about how they got into the GovCon space. How did you get into GovCon?
Well, I got into GovCon by not knowing what I wanted to do and not having a job lined up after college. So being a native of Northern Virginia and inside the Beltway, what most people don't understand about DC is that it's a company town. And it's a company town by everybody works for the government, either directly, indirectly, or through third party. So I went to a government contractor because they were the first one I got a suitable job offer from, and kind of stuck with it because, all the opportunities it provides, but, a majority of the companies that I lived in close proximity to in the, DC metropolitan area were, mostly government contractors. So that's how, not really the most sexy story, but, basically being born and raised in DC, it was what everybody else was doing. So I was no exception.
Well, that helps. And that leads me to a follow-up question, because you certainly have a particular area of focus, as we understand, and that is pricing and helping people figure out how to win, with pricing as one of the main reasons, and how to be profitable and all that sort of stuff. So what was the process of generally being involved in GovCon to becoming more focused on pricing? How did that come about?
So it took me about 8 or 9 years working, as a contracts person to kind of get my first feet wet into proposal pricing, right? So I've been doing proposals. Mostly it was, executing non-disclosures and teaming agreements and things like that. But then when I had an opportunity, I was working for a graduated 8A company. I got to do pricing for the first time. And I kind of, ever since that moment, I always look for jobs as, a contract administrator, manager, director that had, duties associated with pricing. As I evolved and found that I kind of was going from job to job, I bore easily. I need a lot of stimulation, a lot of work to do. I found myself initially hating proposals because they were stressful, but then as I started figuring out how they worked and how I wanted to assert myself, my strengths, I kind of started realizing, hey, I can be the guy that kind of organizes the herd, so to speak, and kind of make sure everybody's on the coordinated team. And then frankly, from kind of going from contracts to contracts at different organizations, I was like, you know what? I'm not a fan of the legalese aspect of contract administration, which was 80% of that job. I really just like pricing. So I kind of asked myself, how do I create a career or a job for myself that I can only really do the things that I want to do, in a sense that I got frustrated easily with Word documents and themes, but I was very, very good with Excel. So I was like, I want to work with Excel and not Word. So it was kind of just, kind of walking that path of, I want to do the things that I want to do, and as somebody who's been working for 2 decades, I was like, I earned that right. I deserve it. Let me figure out a way to, kind of work a job into my life, if that makes sense.
Absolutely does. Everyone has a different story, and pricing is certainly an area that's very important in the bid process. And, I could see how there could be entire consulting practices around helping people figure that part out. We just a little bit of a curveball, and we always have curveballs on these sessions. The first gentleman I was going to call on is not with us yet. So Mike, we're going to come to you next. And we have Deborah Moon. And Deborah, I'm going to see if you'd like to join us. I see that you have your hand raised, and I just want to see if that is intentional and if you'd like to ask the first question.
You're on mute if you're asking.
Okay, we're going to come back to you, Deborah. I guess it's possible that your hand is up accidentally, and that's fine. So, Mike, I'm just going to make you, I see you're listed in here twice. You had mentioned that you may have another colleague with you. So I am going to promote both of you to panelists. Okay, we have 4 panelists. We just need someone to give us audio or video or both.
Can you hear?
Yes, can you hear us? Is that you, Mike?
Yeah, I'm here. There was actually a Teams link in that invitation, which for whatever reason I clicked on first, so that's where I ended up. I am here now.
Okay, and welcome to MyGovWatch Live. And for the sake of those of us on the call who are not familiar with your business, where are you joining us from and what do you do?
Joining from the good old state of New Jersey, and we are an expert language services provider to the legal community specifically. So we work with a lot of law firms and a lot of corporations, their legal departments, and are here today to find out more about this from the standpoint of whether government contracts could be a place for us to expand our existing business.
Well, and let me ask you this question before we go further, and certainly, John, I'm going to ask you to chime in here, but is your interest in government contracting federal only, or is it everything, state, local, anything?
We're very open to the different levels of the contracts, and so I may have mentioned to you, or maybe it was somebody else, but we're coming in at a sort of a beginner's level to try to become more proactive with RFPs instead of reactive. So it's more of us looking to find out as much as possible about different platforms and how they differ, as opposed to coming in with very specific thoughts as to how we believe it has to be done.
So, and I understand you want to be more methodical about finding opportunities and pursuing them. So, John, I'm going to ask you if we could talk a little bit about identifying federal government contracting opportunities. Let's say if you provide language translation services. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how you identify which agencies buy what you sell if you provide language translation services?
Sure. So one of my favorite websites out there at no cost is usaspending.gov. That has got a wealth of information from the total contract spend. So in that website, there are a couple keyword searches you can do. So, I would advise going to that website, punching in legal services or, and kind of just see what comes up, right? Use those keywords. You'll see all the agencies, you'll see all the transactions. So you'll be able to pinpoint like where the money's being spent, which states, what zip codes, even what facilities, what agencies are buying that product or the legal services. And then more importantly, what are the companies that are already selling those services as well? So it's kind of USA Spending's a go-to. There's a couple other ones, there's a lot of paid for ones as well. But again, usaspending.gov is keyword search is very robust and very helpful in that endeavor.
Hey, Mike, let me ask you this question. Are you far enough down the path to know whether or not you are always going to be a prime contractor, or is it equally likely that you would be a subcontractor?
Trying to think here. I mean,
we would be the primary contractor.
Directly providing the services.
So you're providing services directly to the government. And I bring that up because a lot of folks may not realize that you can also use that website to identify, and John mentioned this, I think, that you can identify who is already providing services to the government. So at least federally for the USA Spending website, if you were to identify or envision which companies could be providing a service which may require you to be a part of that service as a subcontractor, do you ever have opportunities in the private sector where you're working through someone else?
I can jump in and take that one. The answer is, and hi, I'm Brandon. Nice to meet you guys. I'm the founder and CEO of Divergent. We act as the primary contractor. In our space, there are, what are known as single language vendors, or multi-language vendors, and that would be us. There's a number of reasons, but we don't contract for the competition. There's also quality concerns around that type of setup. We don't subcontract, on the other side of the coin, we don't subcontract to other agencies either, because we lose the ability to control the quality there. So it's we're really going to be we want to be in the primary role. That's how our business is set up. That's kind of the whole quality management process flows towards that structure.
Yeah, and I'll just give you something to think about state and locally, especially. And John, you may think about this a little bit and have some more to add. But I did a webinar a couple of years ago, and I was forced to look in our database. And the webinar was about using open records requests to understand who's buying what you're selling more. And on our platform, we offer what we call open recs access, where you can use us as a straw purchaser of information. So after contracts are awarded, what becomes public information, if you ask for it, if you follow the right process and you write a check, we ask for things like a copy of the contract, a copy of the winning proposal, a list of the bidders, the pricing submitted by each bidder. And I just remember doing this webinar a couple of years ago, and I happened to use a translation example. This was a California contract, and I can give you access to it if you'd like to see it as an example. But you can see when different translation contracts are coming out for bid again. And as one way of developing your pipeline, you could identify contracts through open records requests that appear to be coming out again. So are your services always recurring, or is it equally likely that a government agency just contracts with you for a short period of time and that's the end of it?
All depends from what we've seen. Really, all depends. From what government work that we do, the reason we're here is that it overlaps in terms of what we're doing for other clients. It's just a good fit, one that we want to build. It's a little more cyclical and predictable, but it's hard to answer that one. It does really depend on the organization or institution.
Yeah, so that is certainly part of the strategy, is decide which states you would like to operate in. There's federally and then there's state and local, and try to use the open records process, either without us or with us, to identify which contracts are coming out again in the future. And you can then use the information that you gain from that process to decide where are the opportunities. And that's something you can do and develop a pipeline. Now, as far as federal opportunities, John, can we talk a little bit about the extent to which SAM.gov or other government resources allow you to identify decision makers? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Well, SAM.gov wouldn't necessarily help you find decision makers, but it would help you figure out the agencies that are actively looking for those types of services, right? Like if you want to get on the front end, the pre-award side, the pre-solicitation phase, the request for information and sources sought. But from that process and kind of getting on those, figuring out ways to get on those industry radars, if you have enough time, you can go to those websites, attend their industry days. As an example, Nick, when we were talking a little bit earlier this morning, I mentioned, I was doing this 8A conference a bit wrong for the first day and a half. I was like, hey, there's all these agencies here. I'm not working for myself to do government contracting. However, hey, and it kind of dawned on me, oh, my clients are looking for those small business program officers, right? And they were very helpful. They're very highly motivated to help small businesses get access to those customers. So they're very willing to, help explain to you how they're organized, right? And through those organization, you can figure out who those decision makers are. But at the end of the day, you really need to understand that there's two different decision makers with the, one has the funding and one has the authority, right? So influence versus authority. And where I was growing up, and my, kind of how I cut my teeth was the contracting office, right? So what people who are kind of getting into the government space don't not really understand is that the government is not a monolith, right? You're not doing business with the Army. You're doing business with the Army, contracting command, Aberdeen proving grounds, or, so there are over 6,600 different federal agencies that all have their own hierarchies and decision makers. So it really, again, depends on, when you look at USA spending, how do you find those, 3 to 5 agencies that you want to get into, and then kind of go at it that way, attend their industry days, go to conferences where they're going to be at, and figure out how they're structured, and then how to get appointments on their calendars.
Brandon or Michael, John just said something, and it causes me to want to ask you this. Have you gone as far with federal contracting to know whether you are a small business?
I believe that we do not qualify as a technical small business, like in the eyes of the government. I've looked at it. I looked into it years ago, but it's been a while, to be honest.
Yeah, if we trade some emails, either John or I can just help you figure that out. But that's a very important question in terms of some of John's advice, because some of the things that you are able to do, or people that you might reach out to, might change depending on whether or not you're a small business. And John, can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I actually was just curious because, the SBA used the North American Industry Classification System, the NAICS codes, to determine what is or is not a small business. So law firms typically could be up to, I think, about $15.5 million of late before they eclipse that threshold of being a large business. On the flip side of that, a lot of companies are based off employee size based. True story. I used to work for a software company. We were doing about 800 million in revenue. And for the majority of the work that we had, we were a small business because we had 450 employees, and the NAICS code for which we were doing all the work was a 500 employee base. So it's important to understand how those NAICS codes influence what is or is not a small business. And you just never know what kind of results you can get if you just ask the right question in the RFI or the sources sought stage, where you have the opportunity to shape and position those solicitations to your benefit and to your competitors' detriment.
Yeah, and guys, I'm going to ask a follow-up question to see if we can kind of tie a bow on this for you, at least during this session. But before I do that, Chris Grant and Tom Colson, we're coming to you next, just so you're aware. So gentlemen, are there any particular pain points? And obviously, we're not going to give you a silver bullet on one 20-minute session here, but what are some pain points that we're not speaking to that you feel that you're having in your planning activities?
Well, go for it, Mike.
No, just to make clear, so we're really at the very beginning stage here of how we go about this, which platforms we should use, how they differ. So for me, my expectations were more to just sit back, listen, and to see how MyGovWatch works, what the functionality is, what the differences are. We are, and Brandon can correct me if he feels I'm off here or wrong. I don't think we're at the stage really now that we have pain points. We're at exploratory discovery stage, and I think therefore the pain point is where to start. What is the best way to use our time to go after contracts that we know we have a good chance of winning? We've heard a bit about the FOIA requests being a good trick to find out information about where suppliers already are and what the pricing might be, so that we can get an indication whether we should start there. But it's very much getting to know different services out there. I don't know if that helps, but
yeah, absolutely. And just for everyone who's listening, I appreciate Mike mentioning MyGovWatch, and obviously we mentioned at the beginning. I want to make it clear that these sessions should be beyond simply whether or not you're using our product, right? So we want to provide value regardless of whether or not that's the case in these sessions. And Mike, certainly we can have an offline conversation. I'll give you access to the example that I mentioned earlier, so you can see how that works and we can take it further. But guys, thanks for joining. Please stay with us if you can. And if you have a follow-up question, anything at all that relates to your business, just raise your hand and we'll bring you back in.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks for joining, guys.
Thank you very much.
So Chris Grant, I'm going to try to get you promoted as a panelist.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, see you there?
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, Chris, let me see if I can give you, do you want to do just audio, Chris, or
Yeah,
will
audio
you-
is fine. Audio is fine.
Okay, so Chris, what do you do and where are you doing it from?
Well, we are a garment decoration company here in Austin, Texas, and we serve from private to government sectors. And so lately we've been doing a lot of bidding on government projects at the city level, state level, and now we're getting into the federal level.
Okay, and and by the way, I apologize, John, I accidentally demoted you and I'm promoting you again. But so, Chris, can you talk to us a little bit about what your successes have been in government contracting up to this point, and what your challenges have been, so we can try to give you some guidance federally?
Well, we currently have a few city contracts, both here in Texas and in the Georgia area. However, one of the challenges that I do find is our actual pricing. So that's one of the things I was curious about getting on this call, to ensure that we're doing it right. We were able to win a few of them, but then we realized that when we begin to fulfill these contracts, we were losing money. So that's been the challenge here.
John, do you want to speak to that first?
Yeah, Chris, I wish you were on my seminar about an hour and a half ago with the South Carolina PTAC, because I was doing pricing 101. So that said, yeah, you know, as a Barker, I play a lot around with, you know, is the price right or is the price wrong, comma, expletive. But yeah, if you are winning contracts at a price that you're unable to afford, and meaning you're not making a profit, then, you know, what you probably failed to do initially was really discern what it actually costs for you to provide that cost or service, right? So pricing is more of an art than a science. It's more of, you know, my philosophy is I want to capture as much of that customer's budget as I possibly can. Now, the only thing that stops me from doing that is my competition. Now, I view my competition as me first and foremost, but other than that, you know, some companies will try to, you know, go 15x or 15% lower than that stated budget. You know, again, it's a lot of trial and error with pricing. I think the companies that are more successful are ones that can be aggressive on pricing when they need to, but know when they can have higher margins when the circumstances dictate that. I'm a big believer that a lot of government contractors, including the you know, multi-billion-dollar a year firms, they're kind of going about it the wrong way, because they're all basing it on cost plus pricing. They're not really looking at it from the customer's perspective. I mean, think about it like this. I'm going to a store and I see the same product. I don't care if one's making a, you know, 90% margin. I don't really care, as long as I value that product or service. So the costs are really irrelevant from my perspective. They mean everything to the, you know, the seller, right? So again, it's kind of an art. You got to know, you know, your target clients. You got to know your target customers. You got to know your competition. And through all of those kind of questions, and you know, again, what's that customer's budget? How do you maximize your success to not only win the contract, but also have sufficient margins in there to be able to execute successfully and make money?
Chris, a question for you, and this is also a question for you, John, and I'll pose the same question in two different ways. Chris, are the problems with the supply chain that we've been seeing at the tail end of the pandemic here, are they affecting some of what you're talking about? And John, you know, maybe you can start while Chris thinks about this, but to what kind of guidance are you giving people related to supply chain issues as it relates to pricing, and how does that factor into guidance that you give people who are submitting bids?
It's all about competition, right? So one of the things is you get to be a large, government contractor when you are no longer a small business. Many full and open competitive environments require those largest to have a small business subcontracting plan, which means that they're putting the onus on you and your supply chain management, your subcontracting department. And what they expect is you are modeling your bid and proposal efforts like they are from the government standpoint. And what that means is you are soliciting multiple sources. So you have a redundancy, right? Redundancies are very good when you're talking about supply chain. You want to have your A players, your B's and C's, and you know that your A's you're going to have to pay more for, right? Because they consistently show up on time, and however that is. And it's basically finding, constantly sourcing small businesses or any kind of businesses that do the things that you that are instrumental in your success, right? So again, I think it's constantly looking for the competitive landscape and finding those companies to do business with as your subcontractor, but also making sure that you have a woman-owned small business that does this, and you have a service disabled veteran-owned business that does that, and having multiple channels to kind of do the same thing. And again, so if you need to, you can compete on a lowest price, but if it's quality and delivery and timing is more important, then you make that trade-off.
Chris, are you a GSA contractor, or have you looked into that yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it a true statement that it sounds like all of your government experience is at the local level? Do you think what you need, and I'm speculating here, do you just need someone to hold your hand through some of the federal terminology and some of the things that are unique about federal contracting versus state and local? Do you think that would be of help?
That would be a help. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what I've been working on all week long. Trying to get a handle on what are the means by which the government at the federal level expects its vendors to operate. How do they expect you to go about doing business? So I'm thinking that would definitely be of help. Now, to answer your question, where did I go wrong? I think with my projects, we were quoting on the bigger numbers and giving some type of a price discount, only to find out that the actual customer wanted smaller quantities over a longer period. So we kind of missed it there, and that's where we begin to lose money, because they begin to maybe order onesie, twosie kind of thing when we were expecting hundreds and thousands. So that was a challenge there. And it wasn't so clear in the proposal, because we asked the question, is this a one-off deal? And they were like, yes, but then when they begin to order, because there's a fine line in the contract that they can go less or more, then they went with that less part.
And this is a particular local buyer you're referring to?
Well, both. I mean, the local, well, they're not local. I mean, I'm here in Texas, but in Austin, our clients are in Dallas and Atlanta, so, but I found the same scenario popping up.
Chris, I would tell you this, and I'm sure Jon will chime in or maybe want to have some interaction with you after the call if you're open to it, but there is an entire dictionary of federal terminology and processes that is completely unique to federal contracting. And I think you're on the right track in understanding that federal is really its own animal. So keep thinking of it as a totally different thing. I would encourage you to start down the path of looking into GSA contracting. Do you know if you're a small business?
I'm a small business, yes.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask where your products are being produced?
They're right here in the US.
Okay, so that's a big plus as it relates to federal contracting.
Yeah.
So those are just some things that I would consider. Any kind of other webinars that are just geared towards very general federal topics, right? I would attend those that are just learning.
Yeah.
So that's my guidance, and certainly speak to Jon after the session if there's interest there about some of your pricing issues. But does this help?
Yes, sir, for sure.
Jon, anything else to add?
Yeah, I put something in the link there. That's the GSA price estimating tool, like where they calculate what, standard fully burdened rates ought to be. I can't speak to the state, local, or education, the SLED market like Nick can, but for the feds, they pretty much tell you what the minimums and maximum orders are going to be to kind of mitigate that risk. Because, if you think about it from, I've seen companies invest, 6 figures in specific bids. And a lot of these bids are, multiple award, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, IDIQ contracts that only have a minimum of $5,000. And, who would make a $100K investment in something where they're going to get $5,000 off it? No one in their right head, right? But the thing is, you got to pay to play sometimes, right? You got to get those hunting licenses to be available to be those vendors, that are in the within the gate, right? But there's really, not a lot to be said about, if the volume isn't there. But, again, from my perspective in the Fed, they tell you what the minimum volume is going to be to kind of mitigate, what happened to you. And I'm sorry that, that happens all the time, right? They don't have the money anymore, or the requirement went away, or, the whole thing's obsolete now because of, a level up in technology. So you just, you don't know. And it's constant, evolution of being discerning of what's going on in the overall marketplace, but also your industry as well.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us, Chris, and please raise your hand if you have any follow-up questions. And right now, I'd like to invite Tom Colson to unmute. Hey, Tom, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, nice to meet you electronically.
Enjoying
it so far.
And Tom, tell us, what do you do and where do you do it from?
So I work for a company called Aircuity. We manufacture, sell, and support a technology product that's used by high-performance buildings to save energy. Company's out of Boston. I'm out of our Philadelphia office. I run our vertical channel partners, and I run our newly founded government sales program that I am adequately and woefully under-equipped to manage. That's why I'm here. So
short.
You're
learning.
Tom,
right?
You're already ahead of the game
Exactly.
by knowing what you don't, not knowing that there are lots of things that you don't know, and that puts you in a good position.
Learned a lot. We've used, a consultant. And so the reason I, ended up speaking to you, Nick, the other day was that, I want to look at, MyGovWatch. We need a better source for finding opportunities and finding the different stages than we're getting from SAM.gov. And Jonathan, I'll point out that usaspending.gov, before I got on here, I looked at that. That is gold. If anybody on this call hasn't looked at that yet, look at that, because I typed in one search trying to find these Department of Energy savings performance contracts, and bammo, all the awards were there, and I've been unable to find that for 3 months now. So this call's worth my time already.
I'll send you an invoice soon, Tom.
Yeah. Forward it along. I'll figure for your usual cut.
Well, Tom, we're going to get into some of the questions that you asked when you signed up, but I just want to put an idea on the table, and this relates to SAM.gov, and it certainly relates to USA spending. And I'll just sort of introduce this idea. The use of NAICS codes. I'm actually writing an article about this. We're doing a fair amount of analysis on how the federal government codes its purchases around NAICS codes. And that is something that we're going to be publishing in the next 30 to 60 days. And I would just say this, and Jon, you may have some ideas on this, but we are finding lots of evidence that the federal government is not very good at assigning the correct NAICS code, either during the acquisition phase or possibly even, and I haven't studied USA spending from this standpoint, possibly even if you're searching on USA spending, perhaps they're using the same tags after the purchase has been made. So I would just caution you to not over focus on NAICS code, and you're going to see more from us on that in the near future. But tell us a little bit about some of the pain points that you're having so that we can give you some good feedback, Tom.
Yeah, I'll tell you too. And I will say on NAICS codes, even if they haven't coded correctly, for my particular application, it's ambiguous. It's like engineering services, I think it's called.
1330. That's the biggest one there is.
Yeah. So it could be anything, right? So anyway, I've abandoned searching on that. So the pain point that I'm having, and I was hopeful to talk about, is trying to find I'm trying to find these opportunities. So U.S. Department of Energy is running an energy savings performance contract, and ESPC, which is a contracting vehicle that they use to pay for these energy projects. And they're running this at Sandia National Labs. And I'm 100% sure that this is an active opportunity. I've spoken to the contracting officer at an event for Sandia National Labs about it, and they were only able to say it was put out, it's been held back, and it's going to be a month. You know, I mean, they can't really say much, but you can't find it anywhere on sam.gov. Like, I've looked 20 times and I can't find it no matter what I type in. So the question is, more specifically, how the heck do I find these opportunities that are, while they are in either planning or design stage? Like, good that once it comes out as an RFQ, but my understanding is there's a lot of public information that's made about when the agencies are planning the project, and would love to find it in that stage. And then the bolt-on question to that first question is, how do I find out the decision makers you were speaking about, either the funding or the authority that you discussed? Like, I have no idea how to find these people.
So, John, before I ask you to chime in on this, Tom, do you know if you're a small business?
We are. I looked up, yeah. And I'm in the
Okay.
same situation. We're manufacturing, and I think it's 500 employees, and we got way less than 500 employees.
Okay, and obviously what John or I may say about this is going to change a lot, and this is for anyone who may be with us today. Our answers and what we tell you may change substantially based on whether or not you're a small business. So, John, do you want to talk a little bit about, finding planned spending and org charts and that kind of thing, and how you recommend people bird dog some of these things?
I would call it
Yeah.
early phase opportunities.
Yeah, the government will call them pre-award, right? They're conducting market research. That's what they're supposed to do, right? So there's a prescribed procedure, illustrated as prescribed by the FAR, the Federal Acquisitions Regulations, right? So, and I agree with your frustration on the NACE codes. As somebody who has also done a lot of content on the NACE codes, it's the wrong approach, because roofing and LED type of stuff may be crammed under engineering, but so is shipbuilding, right? So I always use it as a kind of triangulating what is the core thing that you want to do, and finding the volume of the NACE codes that are used most likely by specific agencies that you're targeting, right? So again, you got to figure out how to get from the macro to the micro, in a sense that, okay, these agents, because the agencies will use different NACE codes for the same thing. VA uses something different than GSA that uses something from the Corps, right? For the same thing. Again,
Right.
Think about it from the human perspective. I don't know which one of this is. I'm just going to do the engineering one, right? Because,
Right.
at the end of the day, but that said, we kind of alluded to some of the tactics we would use for trying to get smart on a specific agency, but it really is a matter of finding those, 3 to 5, and I don't want to say agencies per se, because that's a misnomer. It's really offices, right? It's really finding those decision makers on the funding side, the end client, right? And then on the compliance side, the contracting office side, right? And from that, kind of looking at the data, leveraging tools like MyGovWatch. Once you know who those agencies are that are buying the most amount of work that you are, contemplating to sell, then you can start Googling, and not Googling, but going to their website. Most of these agencies are very, very transparent. They want to look for businesses that are up and coming, and they're looking for, the newbies, if you will, because they're tired of giving the work to the same companies over and over again.
And to be clear, you're saying go directly to the agency and just look under their the section of the website that says team or
how to do business with us. How to do business with us. Again, if you're a small business, then they'll look for their small business program office. They'll want to meet you, and they'll be able to probably open some doors for you if they like your capability statement, right? If they like what you're doing, and they'll be able to be an advocate for you, because again, they are looking to constantly boost their numbers to small businesses and veterans and women-owned businesses, et cetera. But again, you got to build that customer intimacy by thinking strategically, thinking, how do I get ahead of these opportunities before they come out?
right.
And in order to do that, you got to hone in on the market research phase, which in sam.gov is code for request for information and sources sought. I
Yeah,
can't
okay.
speak to
Tom, John mentioned sources sought, and I'm glad he said that because, assuming you are a small business, and I assume, and you've said you are, sources sought is a type of notice that you'll see, through our website and certainly on sam.gov, where they're actively looking to see who can sell us this product or service. And so there are regulations around what they must do if they believe that small businesses are able to fulfill the need, right? So whenever you
Okay.
see a sources sought, I would not only say to respond to it, if you're aware of other small businesses that you compete with, frenemies, as we're all familiar with this term. We have in the past recommended people, in a former consulting life that I had, all submit answers to the sources sought, because if there's enough small businesses that can bid on an item, then it creates a requirement for them to set it aside or consider setting it aside for a small business.
Okay. Okay.
I would mention also that John mentioned a capability statement. Are you aware of what that is?
Yeah, I am. And yeah, I've made one. Yeah.
Okay, you have one of those. So I would tell you that most federal agencies have a contracting forecast. Have you stumbled across any of those on federal websites?
No.
Yeah, okay, so you can look at different agencies and what they are forecasting to be their future purchases, right? So there's a little bit of a game that can be played by some of the procurement people. Once something is publicly announced, the rules change on what kind of communication they can have with you. So if something isn't a real thing yet, you can talk to anybody you like. You can influence it. You could say, hey, this should be the requirement. You should set it aside for small business, and you can take all kinds of meetings. But once it is a solicitation, then it's really just a rote process through the acquisition process of formal Q&A and what happens through sam.gov. So tell me, to what extent does that help you with your pain points, and what other pain points do you have? And by the way,
just add on to that real quick, Nick.
Yeah,
let me add on to that real quick. Yeah,
Go ahead.
that's an important distinction that you mentioned about, the difference between the market research phase and the solicitation phase. So the market research phase, you can go and have one-on-one discussions with anybody you'd like, all the decision makers you could find. When the RFP is actually out, when it goes from pre-award to active solicitation, they are handcuffed because they are not allowed to have, they're afraid to give those one-on-one information, because again, the appearance of being biased toward one bid or the other is something they avoid at all costs. So everything's got to be very much by the book. So as Nick was saying, the Q&A and stuff, they're not going to answer any questions you have over the phone. You're going to have to document everything from that point forward. So any question that you have is also going to be released to everybody else who's following that solicitation.
So take whatever criteria they're going to be searching under, and in MyGovWatch, make one of the filters market research, pre-award, sources sought. Right? If I make those the filters, then I'm only seeing those, right?
Yeah, so we can, I try not to make the webinars too specific to our product, but certainly let's continue this conversation offline, Tom.
Yeah, sure.
And there are certainly ways that you can get at that information, and our site is one of those ways. But in terms of what's actionable, I'm hoping that what we're telling you, kind of pushes you in a direction. Do you feel that it does?
I do. Can I have one more question before I get thrown off?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So Jonathan, back to the, you had mentioned about how to find decision makers to attend industry days, to try to figure out how they're structured. In your experience, would somebody who's new to it, right? I'm still just trying to find the people that I want to start to establish relationships with. Is that also just going to either the office or to the agency and just looking on their site to see, do they list their industry days? They're like, oh yeah, GSA, Vision, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So most astute procurement shops will release a agency forecast where they are going to tell you, hey, we are going to have these requirements in the next quarter or the next 18 months. So they'll forecast opportunities for the half of the people targeting to do business with their agency, right? So those are, an agency forecast. So every agency is a little, or, again, it's an agency office or department and office, right? So agencies will be the hierarchy ones, and they'll kind of figure out which departments and offices will it'll be under their purview. So again, start with the top and then kind of drill down into the specific offices that you want to do business with. But yeah, it's all very transparent. They are looking to do business with you. As Nick said, those sources sought, they are actively looking for it. And oftentimes, if you're the only one responding to sources sought, sometimes you get direct awards, you get sole source awards, again, because they're like, hey, we've seen what we need to see. This company's doing everything that we're asking them for. We gave everybody 2 opportunities to respond. No one responded except for this company, and they responded twice. So again, it behooves you to be on the ball with that. But that said, just because you didn't respond to RFIs and sources sought doesn't mean that, you may not, don't forego also looking at all the solicitations too that line up with your criteria.
Right. Okay.
Tom, another idea is that there's a sort of a false idea out there that every government need is wired for company A or company B. There are a lot of government needs that go unmet. And just realize that. And my last question for you is, do you believe that what you're selling could ever be bundled with another service or product offering, or are you always going to be the prime contractor?
Actually, we're usually not the prime. We usually do bundle. We look to partner with performance contractors, and yeah, we do bundle.
Okay, so then you need to pay attention also to who may be selling something that the government is buying, where it's not mentioned in the title or even in the description on SAM that is an implied part of the work. So I would encourage you to look at it from that standpoint too.
Thank you. And that took me right back to that usaspending.gov. What I saw there was all of this contracting vehicle that have been awarded in the last 3 years, and these things go on for 5 or 6 or 7 years. And bam, that's exactly the guys I'm going to hit up to say, you should bundle me into your next phase.
Yeah, and if I do, just give a quick commercial to our website, we're using artificial intelligence to try to make sense of what the content of what's coming from SAM.gov, so that we're not relying simply on NAICS codes. I saw an RFP the other day where they were buying a specific type of meal in bulk for a specific religious community. And the person who assigned a NAICS code of animal and food production, but they also assigned the correct product service code. So they got it totally wrong on the NAICS side. They got the product service code wrong. So we're doing things to try to make sense of all that. And that's just my plug for the website. But Tom, thank you for joining us. And we can keep in touch. Jon is a resource for you as well. And if you think of anything else in the next hour, please stay with us and raise your hand.
I'm assuming, Jon, your contact info is on this, right? It's on on somewhere.
Yep.
And I will say this too. Jon will have access to your contact information. If you would like him to call you, just tell us that. And at the end of the webinar, Jon, I'm going to ask for a call to action. Like, what do you want everyone to do, whether it be link up with you or email you or call you. So whatever you say on this webinar will be on YouTube. So it's up to you what you'd like out there.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, call me, definitely. We'll talk.
We'll do.
Thanks for joining us, Tom, and please stay with us. And so we have Maggie Habib, and Maggie, I see that you raised your hand. Before I come to you, I just want to say that I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then after Maggie, Patty King and Cindy Preston, we're wondering if you can join us, and that's just a heads up. And so Maggie, would you like to participate?
I'm here if you can hear me.
Yes, and Maggie, would you like me to promote you to a panelist, or you want to just do audio? One more time.
Oh, audio is just fine.
Okay, thank you for joining us, Maggie. So what do you do, Maggie, and where are you joining us from today?
Guys, for putting this on. So I am in Los Angeles, and we run a communications agency, so public relations and marketing. We have traditionally been focused in the private sector. However, there are 2 specific areas of interest for us in public sector work. One of those, and they're very much in keeping with what we've done for years and years in the private sector successfully. So one of those is in healthcare. So during COVID, we partnered with about 3 dozen county Department of Health organizations in doing public communications around COVID testing and vaccination and treatment. And again, that was on behalf of a private sector client, but we got a taste of it, and we, certainly have great experience that we can bring to bear. And then the second is in electrification. So clearly there's NEVI funds that are being handed out to counties as we speak. And we were on a webinar the other day from the Electrification Coalition that shared that, there's county speakers on there, and they were basically like, communication is going to be what makes or breaks county success as they get funding, right? Communication with stakeholders, with the community, with other agencies, and that's a place that we can impact as well. So the question is, I think what we're trying to figure out is, where do we begin? And this has already been super helpful because, we're learning codes and registrations and all of that good stuff, but we're trying to figure out, are we a prime? Are we a sub? Who are those agencies that we would target? Knowing, I think, Jonathan, you made the point that there's probably 5 or 6 involved in something like a transportation initiative.
Yeah, so we're talking about public outreach, public health and wellness, and some traditional marketing techniques, all geared towards public communication for these critical needs. And so have you gone far enough to determine, whether you're interested in doing business in your backyard, or whether you're interested in doing business nationally or with the federal government? So where do you believe you would like to do this kind of work?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, our team is positioned across the country. I think we'd like to do it at the county level. I don't think at this point that we are likely big enough to pursue federal. And quite frankly, I think there's lots of opportunity at the county level in terms of what we are seeing, both on the healthcare front and the transportation front. So, that is our focus right now, but we are in very early stages of figuring this all out.
So we're talking about SLED, state and local and education. So obviously, you mentioned it in your comments that that you want to figure out whether you're going to be a prime contractor or a subcontractor or both. I think you're probably going to find through our website that there are opportunities in both scenarios, because I certainly see opportunities where they specifically know that they want a PR firm to help them with some public outreach around a health initiative or something like that. We'll see those opportunities. But one of the partners in my business is someone who used to have a web design business going back to the early 2000s. And, there used to be opportunities for my partner where they would do a road construction project, and they needed a marketing company to build a website simply to tell the public, this is what's happening with Interstate 95. So I think you're certainly going to see a lot of those kinds of opportunities too. So it goes back to some of the comments that we had made with Tom earlier. You want to make sure, you want to try to look into who would be the prime contractor in that case, right? And you can do open records requests. That's something that came up earlier. You can do those through our website to try to identify contracts that will help you identify who the bidders are to those types of contracts. And that will also help you federally if you want to try to identify some federal prime contractors. And I do disagree. There is an opportunity with federal contracts. I don't want to dominate this conversation. John, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I don't disagree. A lot of people think that, getting into the Fed market is, there's huge barriers of entry, which I don't believe is the case. Now, in certain industries there are, like think cyber, right? Think like manufacturing, but something like public relations, I just went into USA Spending and found over 1,000 contracts in the last 4 years. The biggest one being $300 million by a firm called IPX Dextra. But again, yeah, I've never heard of them either. But again, they're doing work in the public communications sphere. Again, so and the beauty of those kind of websites is you can really pinpoint specifically the agencies that you want to work for. Like think when COVID started, right? CDC was spending tons of money in that regard. Wash your hands, wear your mask, things like that. And how do they do that, right? So they're throwing the money at companies that do what you do. It's just a matter of being available at the right time for them, but also leveraging some of the tools that are out there, and having not just a SLED focus, but also think federal, as long as it's within, your sweet spot, the work that you want to do and are comfortable of doing. Right. Because again, a lot of times I found as companies kind of level up and, get more niche, they get more specific in what they're offering. They're like, hey, we want to work with CDC. We don't really want to work with DoD. Right. And again, so I think once you kind of figure out who's buying, what you're selling, then you can kind of really figure out, how it is you want to maneuver, within that space and figure out, who the frenemies are that are more the friend than the foe.
Got it. Okay.
So Maggie, how large is your business, and is this your business?
It is. We've been doing this for about 10 years and grown completely organically, like I said, in the private sector. But we're seeing that we can be highly effective. On the, in the public sector arena, we just, again, don't know how to get started. We have the capabilities, we have the expertise, we have a team of, we're not big. But what we've been able to do, even in the private sector, is bring in subs underneath us and basically match the capabilities of these massive PR agencies where we all used to work. So from a scale perspective, it's there. From a size perspective, on paper, we might have some challenges.
I would encourage you to look into the WOSB program federally. And the reason for that is twofold. One, it has merit in and of itself when you do look at federal opportunities federally. But secondly, it's not that big of a barrier to become certified, and certainly you run the business, so you would be a woman-owned small business. That is a moniker that you can use at the state and local level. It doesn't have currency other than marketing currency, but you're aware of the value of marketing currency. So saying that you are a federally recognized woman-owned small business is something that will help you at the state and local level, even if it's not intended for those programs.
Got it. Okay. Yep. We'll definitely do so.
Yeah. And so beyond that, I would just say, let's keep in touch, because if you have any challenges finding some opportunities on our website, or finding which categories might be suitable based on who you're trying to locate as prime contractors, that's an ongoing conversation that we'd love to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to continue the dialogue, because it's I think it's going to take some decoding to figure out which agency within a county is holding the dollars on things like electrification, infrastructure, et cetera. So
absolutely. So Jon, anything to add? And by the way, we're starting to thin out a little bit. We're only into the third 90-minute stretch here. And some folks who said they could stay with us were not able to stay with us. So we're going to have maybe a hole to fill pretty soon, based on who said they might attend versus who's actually with us. So now would be a good time to raise your hand. And Jon, I'll let you tie a bow on this.
Yeah, just the DOE, the Department of Energy, and they have a sub office. It's like the National Energy's Renewable Lab. That's something that, you may want to look into. I helped a client over here where I live on the East Coast get her foot in the door, and she runs HR. She tells companies how to run, how to optimize their team performance. And she was like, there's no federal government opportunities for me. I said, don't be too sure. And found one for the National Energy Renewables Lab in Idaho, of all places. Or I think it might have been Montana, but it was up there somewhere I would not have expected. But again, the government literally buys anything and everything you can imagine, and a lot of times too, I think it's, just important to, that's why I'm in outer space here, right? You just get a different perspective of things that, don't really make immediate sense. But when you kind of take a step back and like, oh, that does make a ton of sense. DOE's got a lot of misinformation they're trying to combat about, renewables and all these other things. So, I think there could be some opportunities there for you.
Yeah, that's huge. And we would definitely be well equipped to do that. So I'll look into that. Awesome. But yes, would love a follow-up conversation.
Happy to help.
Maggie, let's keep in touch. And that applies to Jon as well. And thanks for joining us. And please stay with us if you'd like.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go to Nathaniel Rogers and Chiara Williams. I'm trying to promote you to a panelist. I know what you'd like to talk about, and I think we could definitely cover it. So Nathaniel, I'm going to try to promote you also. And if you want to give us audio and video, that's up to you, or just audio is fine as well. Let's see if you got that prompt. Okay, Nathaniel, I see that you're joining us, and can you hear us?
Yes, I'm having internet issues, so I don't know if I can. Oh, okay, yep, my video's on. So I just recently moved to Houston, Texas, and I am a small business IT consulting firm. So I specialize mostly in IT PMO transformations. I have about 10 years experience working for the larger consulting firms like Deloitte, Accenture. My current client is PwC. So I just relocated here to Houston, Texas, and I'm going through the process of becoming minority certified, veteran certified, and disabled veteran certified. So I was actually just researching some different sites that I can go on to where I could join some of their distribution lists for the government to get notified of different IT project management jobs that they may have coming up. So I was joining the call to see like what would you advise me to do, or some next steps or something like that.
So it sounds like you're wanting to start with things happening in the state of Texas. Is that right?
Yeah. Of course, with IT, you can do, especially now after post-COVID, you can really work from anywhere. But I think I want to maybe start out in Texas because it's locally, but I'm open to different nationally, really, because like I said, my project with PwC is actually housed out of Florida. So I'm open to anywhere remotely.
Yeah. So you're already working as a sub to PwC.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a significant relationship.
Yeah.
Have you looked into the state of Texas's Hub Zone program?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't. So I'm actually in the beginning stages of their certification. So I just submitted all of my paperwork to their website. So now they're going through the process, I guess, of validating my paperwork to give me the certification. So I'm not sure if that's a separate certification than the minority and the veterans.
Yeah, so it's been a few years in the state of Texas since I've looked at this, but I'm pretty sure there's a Hub Zone program that's specific to Texas. I would look into that, see if you qualify for that. I would also look into some open records requests, because I know the more significant RFPs in Texas have a subcontracting plan requirement in Texas, and we've seen these documents a lot over the years. And you can actually see which companies are being named as subs for different things. So you can see who your competition is if you do some of those requests. Those are requests you can do through our site as well, but you can do them, yourself if you'd like. So I would encourage you to look into that. And I think you probably, if you're using our site, you're probably seeing a lot of opportunities. So you want to try to, and this might be an opportunity to spend some time with us offline. You might want to spend some time with us to filter a little bit some of what you're seeing. Do you feel that you're seeing too much?
Yeah, I was on sam.gov and I just typed in like PMO, IT PMO, and I got 3,800 pages. So yeah, I think I need
Well, I will say, Nathaniel, that we should spend some time offline, but do you have any other specific questions about what you should be doing?
I don't know.
I can chime in a little bit on,
Go ahead,
that.
John.
So you mentioned you have a subcontract with Accenture, right? Do you know who's that end client?
I used to work for Accenture. So with PwC right now is my client. It's an internal PwC project. So PwC is the client that's funding the project. There's no outside client.
So one of the things you could do, right, is you can look at all of PwC's records, all their contracts, and you can figure out if anything aligns up with IT PMO. And if it does, then you already have a foot in the door because you already have a relationship with PwC. And if you all those large businesses will have a specific person or maybe department called the Small Business Liaison Office. Some people call it an SBLO, but they're the people who are looking for, kind of going back to the supply chain management challenge we were talking to. They are looking for diversifying their supply chain to get minorities, to get veterans, to get women, and redundancies in key areas that they, that are critical for them for their mission success. And that said, I think kind of building up your corporate resume, if you will, right, is something that is going to pay a lot of dividends down the road. And you want to document all the things that you're doing for PwC. You want to capture some of those testimonials that they're doing, because you can parlay that into future bids with state or local or federal authorities, in a sense that, they're not going to award to companies they don't know about, but they're going to award to companies where I can call somebody at PwC who will verify the, accuracy and the good work that Nathaniel has done for them. That makes sense?
Yeah. So I just updated my LinkedIn to reflect all of my past projects as well. Because I have, like, say, 10 years experience in PMO, but probably like 1 or 2 years experience self-employment.
Yeah, I would leverage everything you have, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be from self-employment, because everything you've ever done in your career, and kind of figure out a way to best leverage that. If again, it really all depends what the client's requiring, right?
Yeah.
But again, document all of those things as you kind of progress through your journey. And again, the small business liaison officer of those big firms can be some of your best friends. But my experience is you have to be super specific. And hey, PwC, I noticed you have this contract with DLA doing IT transformation. I would love to be able to talk to somebody on that to see if there's anywhere that I can assist.
Yeah.
Always think about that next one, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do now. That's why I'm on this call.
Awesome.
So Nathaniel, hopefully that helps. Please stay with us. Raise your hand if anything comes up that you think of. And please join us every month if you'd like. And we'll continue to talk about these issues. We'd love to have you back.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so now we have just about 15 minutes left. And, obviously, all of you filled out a form, and some of you who are still with us mentioned that you would like to participate. So at this time, I would like you to raise your hand if you would like to introduce your business. This video will be on YouTube, possibly forever. We'll give you a link to it after, and you will be able to share this link with any number of people who we definitely had people in these sessions end up getting new business from one another. So if you'd like to introduce your business, I know there are some folks here who said they'd like to do that. If you could just raise your hand. So Jon, what are some things that maybe came out of the New Orleans event that were new, or trends that are going to happen with 8A businesses or with GovCon in general that maybe came out of you attending that event? Anything really super interesting for a general audience?
Just how broad and deep this market is, right? There are so many different types of government contractors that, any kind of industry is represented almost in those kind of events, right? The biggest takeaway for me is, I wasn't really there for the information sessions. I don't, need that. It was more for networking for me. But one of the information sessions I did attend, it was useful because I had heard of this term value mapping before, and I didn't really quite comprehend what it was until it was explained to me, kind of like what I just told to Mr. Rogers there. It's really about documenting the work you've actually done. You have demonstrable proof that you've done these things, and parlaying that into future opportunities. Because as you level up in your government contracting game, and again, my experiences with federal, but they are going to require companies to provide up to 3 past performance references, where they're going to call this agency or this customer and verify your claims that you can do these things. And I found that, whatever your resume says you can do, focus on that. Don't focus on things you want to do that you don't have a resume for. Figure out a way strategically to get those foot in the door, but you have to start with what you have demonstrable past performance of.
You know, it's funny you mention that, because one thing we can do here is kind of speak to a question that came in on the sign up form. And I think it's a question we could field, and I can just tell this person to check out the video. So someone wrote, how can I use past performance, or my personal past performance, or can I use personal past performance if my company is a newer company and the company itself does not have past performance? So any insights there, John?
I advise companies that haven't been around for a while is use the founders, use the leadership team's experience, corporate, further experience. Again, you have to start somewhere. So, and again, we were talking about that capability statement. That should be like the representative of that leadership's team, collective brain trust, right? All the things that they can do. There's a reason why they formed a business. And, the things that they want to do, they should be able to have a resume that speaks to that. Some of the jobs that I've bid where we're talking, dozens and hundreds of people, we have to provide resumes for every person that we bid. And the people have to have X amount of years of experience and a master's degree that's in, a STEM field. Right. So again, think about that earlier on in your journey and capturing that information that you're doing now that you have done in the past, so you can parlay that into bigger and bigger jobs down the road.
Absolutely. And that helps a lot. And I think it will help the person who signed up curious about individual past performance. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Grant, who joined us earlier. Chris, if you want to give us audio, video, or both, the rest of this session is pretty much all yours.
Yeah, I'll stay with audio. In answering that question, I had a similar situation regarding references for another business that we're starting. And so we were going to enter the general construction space. And I had spent years working as a project manager for another company. And so what I did was to reach out to those clients and say, hey, we're starting our own company, and I would like to know if we could use you as a reference. I just went down the list of the people that we work with, and I documented with an email, and every single one of them says, yes, 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 yes. So maybe that's one way to go about doing that.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear that success, because I was one that was a little embarrassed to ask for those testimonials, right? And then I was kind of flabbergasted when I got brave enough to do that, and people were very willing to do that. And it just, you have to start somewhere, right? And you have to have credibility. You have to have proof of your claims, right? You need to build credibility, because people, while I want to trust everybody, I have learned that I can't trust everybody. So, again, the government's no different. They want to give money to companies that can do what they claim that they can do. So it is also very important too, when you're submitting bids, to ensure that you can do every single thing that they're asking for. And if you can't do every single thing, that's okay. You can do most of it. Find the people that can help you to get all the things done. And it's okay to get that redundancy, because again, subcontract management, supply chain management, redundancies are good. And having your teammates compete amongst one another is also good for you to kind of keep prices in check.
Chris, can I ask you, you said you're in Texas, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We had a gentleman by the name of Irv Hughes, who was a co-host in October, and he is near Houston. Are you near Houston?
About 2 hours away.
Okay. I'm just going to put you in touch. He's a finance guy in government contracting, and I'm just going to put you in touch with him, because you may know people who need to finance different government contracts, and he is a local contact, and you could look him up on YouTube under the MyGovWatch Live channel if you go to the October event. I was wearing a Phillies cap. He was wearing a Houston Astros cap. And it worked out for him. It didn't work out for us. So, Chris, can I ask you, when were you in construction? Like, what was the last year you were in construction?
Well, about a year and a half ago. So during the pandemic, when everything kind of slowed down, we were looking for other ways to contribute. And so I had a friend of mine who was in the construction business, and I just decided, okay, let me go help him out. And so my role there was in project management. So I just went out and worked as a project manager for that company. And that's how I built those relationships.
Well, it's good that it was recent, because there's a concept in federal contracting. They want your past performance to be recent. So if you had said that you were in construction 8 years ago, I might have said some things that were discouraging, but your past performance is recent enough where you could pursue that, and just realize there's a shelf life for that. So if you want to do something in construction, time is of the essence.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah,
And
thank
so
you,
we
Nick.
have another, and Chris, I welcome you to stay with us. We're going to leave your audio on in case you think of anything. We have another gentleman who raised his hand, a guy by the name of Nick Summers. And Nick, I see you've joined as a panelist. If you could unmute.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Nick. How are you?
Pretty well. Guys, love the session. It's been incredibly educational. I've attended a few of them already and just have been outstanding in terms of helping us to accelerate our movement into the market.
Well, it's a very casual format, and I think that's what people are responding to. I mean, so many of these webinars, it's a monologue, and I'm trying to get to exactly what people are trying to figure out. And so I understand, Nick, you're interested in the criteria that decision makers use. Can you talk a little bit about what your pain point is, and maybe we can help you figure something out?
Sure. So it's kind of evolved since I submitted the question, and we have a unique scenario where we're working towards a different angle with dealing with government contracts. So in specific to us, we provide services to primes and subs to help them become compliant, specifically around the new CMMC2 that's already just about on the roadmap. It's going to require all 300,000 primes and subs to the government in all of these different areas that you've discussed. And so one of the challenges that we have right now that we're hoping to get sorted out is finding the contracts. It's not so much the contract itself, which I think is a big focus for many of the companies that are on these sessions. It's finding the subs and primes that we want to go do work for. We do want to do work for the government, but our initial steps are to work with the primes because the government's requiring them to have this standard, and the majority of these 300,000 don't. So what we wanted to leverage GovCloud for GovWatch and also SAM is to try to figure out the best way to filter through this massive amount of bidders on these engagements and then work with them. So we're trying to go at this funnel from the bottom up as opposed to government contract and then becoming a prime or sub. We're almost in essence, as it's a big four. We're a sub to potentially a prime or a sub to a sub. We just help them be able to have these contracts with the government. So we're a little bit of a different flavor, but our focus is in the public sector.
And I apologize, Nick. I should have asked you what I like to ask everyone on these sessions.
Yeah.
And for those who are still with us, and there's still a lot of people with us, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and where are you joining us from?
Sure. So I'm joining from Tampa, and the company I work for, we're a Big Four firm, and we provide technology consulting services. Specifically, though, in this vertical is this new opening in the government sector around this compliance standard that is being required for all primes and subs for any government contract, whether it's DoD, whether it's DHS, it doesn't matter. As long as they've adopted this standard. And so with 300,000 of them in this space, there's a lot of opportunity to do these smaller pieces of work. And so as we're developing this new client base, we started looking initially on our biz dev teams at, well, let's just find the contracts that are out there. But we realized that we're not really wanting to be a prime. our main market is going after the subs and the primes. But it's really difficult to start sifting through that vast sea of data to say, okay, these are the types of contracts that we think we would be best applicable towards. And then trying to work as we grow in this space to try to work that way up the funnel.
And just for the sake of us who need things to be explained at an 8th grade level, at an 8th grade level, what specifically do you want to sell to them?
We provide a capability that quickly accelerates them to be able to handle CUI data, so government data specifically. And that's this mandate that's come out from the government now that takes effect. It should take effect in March, but it becomes an auditable issue in about 2 years. And so that we really just help them take an existing environment and make it able so they can work on government contracts that have sensitive data. And but this applies to those that are already in the space that have been doing this for many, many years. This would apply to the Northrops, the Lockheeds that are going to start dealing with primes that are subs and down the supply chain. And so everybody is in this space right now trying to figure out how do we get there. We happen to have a way to do that in a much more simpler way than is the traditional model in the industry.
So you want to be in front of the contractors, not in front of the government agencies, although you think eventually you'll be in front of the government.
Exactly. And that's where we started looking at, okay, how do we find the right places to get ourselves into the market for this type of work? And as I said earlier, we looked at the government contract, said, okay, that's probably too broad for what we want to do. And so the primes and subs, being that there are 300,000 of them that have a 2-year window to get into the game, that became a much more, we thought, a faster market with less contract overhead.
John, do you have thoughts about any of this? And I will go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have many thoughts about
All right,
this.
yeah,
So
I'm happy to turn it over to you because I'd like to pretend that I know everything, but there's certainly parts of this, Nick, where I'm just not familiar with some of what you're talking about. So go ahead. Have at it.
Yeah, so I guess you're familiar with the C3 PAO program.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Oh,
okay,
definitely.
So yeah, I've been dealing with the 800-171 for I don't know 8 years now ish. And again, there's a lot of mass confusion on there. I think they disbanded the initial CMMC board because it was kind of operated like a cartel, in my opinion.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
because it was pay to play, and then the DIB, the Defense Industrial Base, complained because the cartel had basically said we're not taking any engagements under 6 figures, which really was a detriment to a lot of small businesses. So again, I there's a huge market from what you're doing for sure. I would probably, the Northrops and all those other ones, I probably wouldn't even waste your time with because they have their own internal teams doing that. I would probably start on the smaller end of that. And a couple of things that I would advise is small business dynamic search. If you're not familiar with that, that's a good resource to kind of target companies with cyber capabilities. So I would try to create my sales funnels using the small business dynamic search, and also sam.gov, looking at if I noticed you work at Ernst & Young, and you probably have teams that can kind of mine this data, and you mentioned 330K. I had like 778K contractors at least registered in sam.gov.
Wow.
Because you may be missing some of the companies that don't have government contracts yet, and perhaps not having a knowledge or awareness or being able to check yes in the 800-171 compliant, that so you may be, I would look at sam.gov as well for because again, you can you have some people probably that can download that whole entity list.
Oh yeah.
And then,
yep.
And then find it that way, that companies that are that have cyber in their NACE codes or primary or secondary.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, surprisingly, even at scales at the scale of the company we are, our business development efforts in this space, we've really, our government business has been very traditionally focused, and so this is an entirely new ball game and how we're going after the market. So we don't necessarily have that history of pursuits in this space. So we're trying to figure out, okay, are we looking in the right places? Do we have the right size of the clients we want to go after? So we're in that very early stage of trying to develop this model for taking this service to market.
Yeah, I think again there's been a lot of misinformation and bad information and bad faith actors as well. I think in the last couple of years with that regard. So, but again, it's definitely not going away.
Yeah.
CIU is here to stay, but again, it's a lot of training too, and maybe maybe a different kind of thing you hadn't considered is training the government people on how to label CIU stuff, because again, there's a lack of knowledge from that standpoint too.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Right. And so that impacts everybody managing CIU, because I don't have to comply with anything because you're not marking anything CIU. And then they go and rubber stamp everything CIU. You're like, whoa, wait a minute. So there's got to be that, kind of equilibrium that I think is still somewhere to be determined, because it's of all the flux and changes and how fast cyber evolves.
That's a great idea, because those go really hand in hand. We can help. That's really, really good, John. I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Yeah, Nick, thank you for joining us. I'm so glad that John could give you some of that feedback, and let's be in touch, because we're certainly doing a lot of things promotionally. And maybe we can put you in touch with some others who are doing things promotionally that would be a benefit to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look forward to connecting with you, Nick.
Absolutely. And so, Nick, stay with us if you'd like. We're going to stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes. We have Mike Williams. Mike, do you want to join us? Audio, video, or both? It looks like both.
Hey, you said Phillies fan, and I'm your man, so I had to jump in quick. And it's been a rough year for Philadelphia fans. My parents are both from Philly, so.
My wife's a Tar Heel, Mike. I'm sorry about your basketball team.
Well, yeah, sports is sucking right now. Let me tell you, it's the body shots keep coming.
Well, my 11-year-old went to bed crying after the Super Bowl. And as an 11-year-old was crying, not that the Eagles lost, he said, we're going to lose all our free agents and the union are never going to go back and the Phillies stink and, the world is, but, spring training is on and we're ready for some baseball. So
that's right.
Mike, what are you doing? Where are you joining us from?
So I'm calling from Charlotte, North Carolina. I work in a really niche industry, a branding industry, a company called Brand Institute. And we get hired by companies when they have a new product or service, particularly in healthcare, to do naming. We do a lot of the drug names you see on TV, a lot of medical device names, but we do some consumer stuff, companies like Hershey's and Smith & Nephew and some of the med device products, worked with Nike and Coca-Cola. So we're kind of across industries, but much more focused on healthcare than others. And so we do a lot of the naming, the design, logo, packaging, those types of things. At the government level, we've worked with, cities when they want to rebrand, they want to do a new logo, tagline, maybe some positioning. We've worked with a number of agencies in that space, but we don't have a team that's an army devoted to RFP mining, and it's sort of up to us out in the field to find those things. Like recently, I found the city of Clemson, South Carolina, wanted a logo. I found the Actors Equity Guild in New York needs a new name and logo. It's just very specific RFPs, and mining it, I just don't have the day-to-day bandwidth to do it. So, for somebody in a really specific industry like ours, what's our best bang? I mean, I've already written down SAM.gov, USAspending.gov. Where can we go to really to mine through those thousands and hundreds of thousands of RFPs and find the real opportunities?
So Mike, and this came up earlier, I'm not sure if you were on the call.
I was, but I was kind of on two calls at once, so I apologize.
Yeah, that's fine. So SAM.gov, that came up earlier, and you're familiar with NAICS codes, I take it?
Well, what is it? I'm sorry.
You're familiar with NAICS codes?
Oh, yes. Yep.
Okay. So we're doing some research around NAICS codes, and what we're finding out, we're going to be publishing something about this, is that they're really making a mess of the NAICS codes assignments on SAM.gov. So, if you're just choosing the select NAICS code for branding and for marketing, and you're selecting the right ones, it doesn't mean you're going to hear about, the correct RFPs. Our website at MyGovWatch is using artificial intelligence to look at the content to try to figure out which things we should push to you. So I see that you are a subscriber. I think, you might be looking at some upgrades, and we can certainly take that conversation offline. But I think there's an opportunity to use our site so that you're not having to spend hours and hours. Because even if you spent those hours and hours, it's a total crapshoot unless you have tools such as whether it be our site or another competing site, to help you try to make sense of it. Does that help?
That helps a lot. And I've been getting your emails, and they're certainly a lot more specific than other search functions I've used. So I really appreciate that.
It's a mess. It's a real crapshoot because the government agencies, they don't do a good job of explaining what it is they're buying. And the person who names the opportunity, I've even speculated, John, and I don't know if you've ever given this any thought, that one way of limiting competition, if your intention was to limit competition, would be to totally mischaracterize what you're buying. And only tell certain people where to find the bid.
It feels that way, doesn't it? They got a brother down the street who's in the biz, so they make the RFP so nebulous that you just don't even want to read 500 pages.
It's so funny that you said that, because there's a Facebook group I'm a part of. It's like the contracting officers memes. And it's a lot of stuff like that. It's like, hey, we gave this requirement to GSA, so we don't have to worry about CICA requirements, Competition and Contracting Act, right?
Yeah.
Again, one of the main tenets for the federal government standpoint, I mean, think about it. They have to illustrate that they are being prudent stewards of government money, our tax dollars, right? So through that process, they have to conduct market research and compete, right? So they're looking for always one or more bid, or two or more bidders rather. So that said, Mike, I totally empathize with you, because there is such a voluminous amount of data. It's hard to kind of sort through the chaff versus the wheat.
Sure.
And figuring out, I kind of view it as a, floating haystacks with a golden needle that you got to figure out, which time to grab it, because it's not going to be where you grab it. It's when you reach your hand out before and then grab it, right? So,
right.
But at the same time, like the things that you're doing, the government's always invested in things like that. I'm in Wilmington, so close to you on the East Coast.
Great. Nice.
But yeah, they just invested in a rebranding and logo stuff. And I'm just like, part of me is like, why are our tax dollars paying for that stuff?
Sure thing. Yeah.
However,
Wilmington, Delaware, or North Carolina?
North Carolina.
All right, excellent. Great spot.
So
I grew up in Camp Lejeune, so I know it well.
Oh, right on. Okay. So, but yeah, again, it's a matter of picking your spots, right? Finding that, creating that huge sales funnel. These are the things that are coming up that are, very similar, and then kind of niching it down. I always advise clients, like, you see what they're asking for RFIs and sources sought. That's a lot of stuff they're asking for. Is that really a client you can envision doing a good job for? Because I've noticed if they ask for a lot of requirements before you even have a contract, how's that contract actually going to be done? So again, it's really discerning the offering that you want to do, but also the clients that you're trying to attract or dispel, right, through your branding and marketing efforts.
Right.
Mike, can I ask you this question? I've done some branding things in a previous life, and I am aware that is a high value, impactful service. Are there any more block and tackle types of marketing things that you can do for government agencies that might get your foot in the door, so that when the branding comes up, you're a foregone conclusion, you're getting that work?
Absolutely. We get involved early. Some companies don't even know what their positioning message is going to be for a product. They might want to do some market research out with consumers, end users, buyers, anybody that's going to help really in that decision-making function. So we do a lot of research for our companies before we even get to the naming piece. Say, hey, this is the elevator speech. These are the 3 to 5 traits that are really going to make those buying decisions, go in your favor. So we can do a lot of that upfront research, equity research, those types of things. That's primarily we do a lot of that work, that upfront research to really help hone that messaging before we ever come up with a name or a logo for a product.
Are you doing any selling to government agencies that is pre-RFP, or where the purchase is below the threshold that would require a solicitation?
That happens a lot. I wouldn't say in government, but we work with like all the big pharmas, and they have typically 150, 200,000, 250, that threshold, but that they don't have to go to RFP. So we try to stay below those thresholds as much as possible on pricing, just so we're always invited, or at least usually they go to, honestly. They don't like to put it out to RFP if they don't have to. So when we can find those sweet spots where they just call us and go, that's the goal. That's the gold standard for us.
Well, Mike, you have a fascinating business, and I appreciate you joining us. I'm going to have our service coordinator reach out to you and make sure that you have your preferences set up correctly on our site, if you don't mind.
That's great. And you called me yesterday. I'm sorry I missed your call. I really appreciate you calling me. That was awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. I like pressing the flesh, so to speak. We're not always in
Same.
person these days. I don't necessarily get to go to New Orleans like John does, but I like pressing the flesh. It's old fashioned, but I think it works wonders. So with that said, folks, we're at about an hour and 40 minutes. And I think we're gonna wrap it if that's okay with you guys.
And Mike, just so you're aware, I hit you up on LinkedIn, wanted to
Oh,
connect
great,
with
John.
you. I'm
Hey,
always
that's
looking
great.
to fill in my North Carolina, because one of my big aspirations is to help North Carolina disadvantaged businesses capture
Yes.
more federal government work share. The $7 billion coming to the state, 25% of that is staying in the state. The other
That's-
75% is going out of state, again,
That's
for
not good.
jobs here. So I'm figuring out rising tide lifts all boats. And again, so, when I started, PTW was priced to win for my DC centric. When I moved into outer space or Wilmington, right? I got a different perspective, and I was like, okay, PTW, let me mess around with, the coaching that I do. And I'm like, okay, it's plan, practice, pursuit, process to win, all the things that, Nick can talk your ear off on just the sales cycle. And,
Yeah.
so it's teamwork makes the dream work. So
I appreciate it, Johnny. And I'm getting close to that 30,000 contact threshold at LinkedIn. So I'm glad you said it, because I'm going to be capped out here pretty soon. I've been on LinkedIn a long time.
So John, before I take us out, how would you like people to connect with you? And again, this will be on YouTube forever. So would you like them to link up with you, or what would you like them to do?
Yeah, I like going everything through LinkedIn, or, you can email me at Jon, Jon, at pricetowinsolutions.com. Yeah, I think it's probably the best way. I still have some investments I need to still make in my website to get it a better, front end for that. But yeah, that would be the best way. Email me or hit me up on LinkedIn, Jon Barker, PTW Solutions.
So John, thank you so much. And folks, that'll do it for today's edition of MyGovWatch Live. Remember, if you're not already a subscriber, start your free 14-day trial of MyGovWatch.com today. If you want to win more government contracts for less, you'll be glad you did. And thanks for joining us, John.
Thank you for the opportunity, Nick. You all have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thanks a
Bye-bye.
lot.